instructions how to do it when we actually get to that part. There, when you did log in and you called in, you were actually prompted with instructions about *5 to raise your hand, *6 to unmute yourself. So we'll go over that again at the conclusion. So for everyone, so the chat feature is enabled, but we are requesting that people hold off on putting your questions into the chat until the conclusion of the presentation. We want to use the chat for technical support and to know if we have any issues hearing a presenter so that we can make any adjustments as needed. If you do have a question or need a clarification on a term, go ahead and type it into the chat during the presentation. We'll try to make sure that see if we can get to it. If not, we'll flag the slide and the term so that we can address it at the end of the presentation. So you'll hear from a number of parties this evening, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows that Supervisor Faust and Supervisor Palchik's office are represented. Ben Wallace from Supervisor Faust's office and Aria Callender from Supervisor Palchik's office, so welcome. With that, and you'll also hear from some other staff this evening as well. But with that, I'd like to turn it over to our main presenter this evening, Tim Kutz, and he'll go ahead and walk you through the presentation, and we'll go from there. Tim, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Mike. So again, welcome. This is the West Falls Church Active Transportation Study. This is the second round of community meetings we're holding for this study. And we also have another meeting, similar content, same presentation, this Thursday, same time, 7 to 8:30. My name is Tim Kutz. I'm a transportation planner with Fairfax County Department of Transportation, working in the long range planning department. And we're going to cover the study today. The presentation should last about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. And as Mike said, we'll go over sort of how to raise your hand and ask questions and try to get the most out of this meeting as you can. So with that, we can go to the first slide, which will cover the agenda for tonight. So first thing we'll cover, similar to what we covered in the first round of meetings for the study, background and purpose, what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it. We have about 4 slides to cover that, and then a study area map, give you an idea of what it is that we're looking at geographically. And then we'll go into detail about who is actually conducting this study. We have an advisory group with different citizen groups and representatives. They are also supported by a technical group of subject matter experts. We have folks from VDOT, from the City of Falls Church, from various other agencies, which I'll name in the list. We'll talk about the study objectives, the point of doing this study and what we hope to achieve, and the existing conditions assessment that was performed, along with some of the metrics that we used to conduct that assessment. With the advisory group, we've had a number of meetings with them. We've had 4 so far, and we've discussed in detail some potential improvements to the study area. So I'll note those on several maps and some different ideas that we've kind of taken away from those meetings. Then I'll finish with a study timeline, where we hope to go after this meeting, and then, of course, take questions and hopefully provide some good answers for you. So we can go to the next slide and start things off. First, before I continue any further, I do want to define what active transportation is. It's not a term it's being used a little more commonly nowadays, but really we're looking at active transportation as in walking, biking, really any self-propelled, mostly human-powered travel. So that could include electric bikes, electric scooters, and the like. So here's a little bit of background about the study. Back in 2018, the Board of Supervisors authorized staff to look at the West Falls Church area as shown on the map here, specifically looking at subunit A1 and subunit A2 on this map on the right. Subunit A1 includes the WMATA parcels for the West Falls Church Metro Rail Station. Subunit A2 includes Virginia Tech's property. This plan amendment was adopted in July of 2021. We had a task force that met regularly to discuss this plan amendment. Really, what it proposed was an update to the land uses for these 2 subunits. to allow for a mix of uses. So allowing commercial, office, retail, residential uses on subunit A1, subunit A2, allowing for institutional uses, as of course Virginia Tech is located there, along with some retail as well. And the big benefit of looking at this area sort of comprehensively was to see what can we do, knowing that this is, you know, a transit hub. How can we get people to use it, to use Metro, to get to this mixed use development, and you know, walk safely, bike safely and efficiently from the surrounding areas. So a number of improvements were recommended as part of this plan, including pedestrian scale lighting to make sure that pedestrians, when they're walking, can see and be seen at all times of the day, making sure that they have the facilities they need in order to do so. So having wider sidewalks, pathways that, you know, take them intuitively to the station itself, as well as the other amenities in the area, and similar recommendations within the plan text. To go even further beyond what was recommended for these subunits, the Board of Supervisors added, oh, I see a comment. Oh, thanks, Mike. The Board of Supervisors had a follow-on motion for an active transportation study. And this study was really meant to look at, you know, how do we connect folks from neighboring communities to the metro station? I'll note some of the challenges in doing that in the existing conditions assessment slide. And that's what this study is really to look at addressing those challenges and providing recommendations to get folks safely walking and biking to the metro station. So we can go to the next slide. There's a number of other plans that influence. Here we go. A number of other plans that sort of influence this study. You can see on this map here, the black outline sort of marks where the Fairfax County and City of Falls Church boundary is. So that sort of tail that sticks out where you see the ball fields and sort of white boxes. That's the City of Falls Church. They have a development that is currently under construction. They're quite a bit farther along than the county is, and sort of our development planning for these sites. Their development site plan for phase 1 was approved by their city council last August, so they're well on their way to providing a mixed-use center on their property. Adjacent to that, you can kind of see a grassy strip between that and the next development farther to the north. That's the Virginia Tech property. And then, of course, the other white boxes sort of towards the top of the screen is the WMATA development. That is currently proceeding into a rezoning phase. So there was an application submitted by a developer to, again, consider a mix of uses there. And that's sort of a draft site plan that they have laid out. With this plan, there is also a Virginia Tech Smart Cities grant. It's a $10 million grant that's being administered through VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation. And that's really looking to sort of help bring some of these smart technologies, such as adaptive lighting. That's been a big one, kind of idea tossed about, allowing sort of the lighting to adjust to the presence of a pedestrian or a cyclist, so that there can be an energy savings, as well as smart intersections. So including sensors within the intersections around the study area within the City of Falls Church to try to balance out the intersection movements efficiently. So not only allowing vehicular traffic to move through the area efficiently and safely, but also allowing for pedestrians to do so as well. And so those are really the three or four really major projects going on within the study area. There are others, of course, and we'll get to those on the next slide. And actually, before I do that, we do have this slide which covers future traffic volumes. So with the development, we wanted to sort of project what influence that development and these sort of increased land intensities might have on traffic within the area. So this is looking at what's called average daily traffic. You can see sort of in the purple the numbers that are taken from VDOT's calculations for 2019. So that's pre-pandemic numbers. For example, you can see Hitchcock Road back in 2019 had about 12,000 vehicles per day that used that segment of roadway. You can see farther up to the east, it was 6,400. So certainly, closer to the main arteries, Leesburg Pike, you have a bit more traffic. And then we projected using the Fairfax County Travel Demand Model, given the development in the area, not only looking at the sites I just mentioned, but other developments within the city of Falls Church. So if you kind of travel down South Leesburg Pike to where it transitions to Broad Street, there's Founders Row 1 and 2, and other developments by the city. What is that going to do to the area roadways in 2045? So again, this is sort of just a rough estimate of what traffic could look like in the green, how it might increase. And this is really intended to show, okay, we have these pedestrian facilities and these bicycle facilities. Are they going to be adequate for the future? 2045 is a long way off, but we want to make sure, given some of the recommendations that we're proposing in this plan, that they make sense in the future as well. So that's the reason for having this slide. We can go to the next slide. And as I mentioned, a couple more plans here. These are from the county's comprehensive plan. We have the countywide trails plan on the left, which this image is showing the version amended through June 2018. You can see the red outlines show the planned network of trails within the county. So a lot of trails and connectivity already planned sort of as a long range vision. So we're not building from nothing. We have some idea of where we want these trails to go and how we want people to be connected across this larger area. And then you see on the right, the bicycle master plan which was adopted in October of 2014. I'll mention as well the active Fairfax plan, which is a greater countywide effort that is looking to sort of consolidate these two plans, update the guidance for trails and for cyclists, for pedestrians as well. And that's an effort that's been ongoing. They finished phase 1 recently and will be moving on to phase 2. And there's about another year and a half of work for them to sort of update that guidance, include a facility selection toolkit. So give folks an idea of what facilities would be appropriate for given roadways, and a lot of really great guidance to sort of encourage folks to bike and to walk within the county. We go to the next slide, which talks a little bit more about active Fairfax and how we've used that for this study. Active Fairfax, as I mentioned, is a countywide study, but they've included a map that's sort of crowdsourced and allows folks to input comments anywhere on the map that's within the county and let us know where they want to see improvements and where they see barriers to access. You can see an example of that here. You can click on the link above. Once we share these slides, you can go here yourself and add a comment if you'd like. They have a comment type, so barrier to transit access is selected. You can put your name if you want, and then your comment is required. So what you see as a barrier to transit access, you can post it, and then people can even like it, thumbs up, and kind of tag on to your comment if they want. So we've collected these from the active Fairfax team to date. At least a few weeks ago, there were over 1,500 comments, and 100 at least were in our study area. So I'll go over our study area in a minute. With active Fairfax, they are also looking at a Safe Streets for All program, and this is a really important program for the county as we look at improving safety. This was just endorsed by the Board of Supervisors last Tuesday. And really that's looking to increase safety and comfort for all pedestrians, all cyclists within the county, and they've got some really great guidance that they'll be working on, including having additional staff to sort of focus in and hone in on improving safety and comfort for pedestrians and cyclists. So another really great effort that's sort of accompanying the Active Fairfax plan. We can go to the next slide. So that was a lot of background. There are plenty of other studies, if you go to the scope of work on our study website, that influence this one. But to sort of get into the thick of things, we're looking right now at the West Falls Church Active Transportation Study Area map. And starting from the middle, you can see there's the West Falls Church Metro Station. Going out from there, you can see a green outline. That's what's called the effective walk shed. So that's 1 mile that you could walk from the metro station in any direction, given the current facility, so the current sidewalk and roadway network. From there, you can see sort of a purplish circle, and that is the 1 mile radius as the crow flies. And then beyond that is the 2 mile radius. So for this study, we're looking at that 1 mile circle for pedestrian recommendations. What can we do to improve the pedestrian and walking network? And then looking out for the 2 mile radius, we're looking for bicycle network recommendations. A couple other key features to point out on this map. We have, as I mentioned, a lot of plans sort of already underway for the study area. So there are some pink lines indicated by blue circles, sort of, if you go to the study website again, you can see this a lot clearer. You can blow up the map and kind of look at what all these different icons are. But we have a number of completed projects noted within the study area. And then other planned projects. We have a transportation priorities plan that already has a number of projects sort of slated with some may have funding already for them, or an idea of what we want to see improved. There may have already been outreach done for a number of these. So these are all included on that map and have been considered in this study as well. We can go to the next slide. I mentioned earlier the advisory group. That's really the main group that's running the show here. That's giving us feedback and holding us FCDOT accountable for producing this study in a way that is addressing the needs of the community. So we have representatives from Drainsville and Providence districts. We have representatives from the PTAs within the study area, MCA, McLean Citizens Association, the Providence District Council, Fairfax Alliance for Better Bicycling. They've been really helpful in sort of helping us indicate which bicycle improvements are needed in the 2 mile radius, Fairfax Families for Safer Streets as well. So they've, as I said, already met 4 times. We'll be meeting a couple more times as the study continues. Really, where we're at now in this sort of second stage of community meetings is soliciting community feedback. I'll talk about it in a few slides, but we've posted a survey to ask the community members what recommendations they want to see prioritized within the study. And the advisory group will then meet to discuss the results of that survey and sort of deliberate on what they want to put forward for this study. In support of the advisory group, we have a technical group, as I said, made up of some subject matter experts from VDOT, from Nova Parks, from FCPS, Fairfax County Public Schools, a number of other entities that will help sort of guide the process, make recommendations. If they see an issue with one of the proposals being made, they might be able to point out some ways that we can refine that proposal or some alternative solutions. They've also helped provide some data. FCPS, for example, has provided some walking data, so the number or percentage of students that walk to schools within the study area, take car or ride bikes to their schools, and so that's been really helpful. That group has met 3 times, and it will meet a couple more times throughout the study. We can go to the next slide. So the objectives: number 1, making sure that we provide plenty of opportunities for community input. So having this meeting obviously is a big one. Making sure that we're letting you all ask the questions you want to ask and providing the answers that you need. Again, the community survey, hopefully we can get a lot of people involved in that and get feedback from the community survey. But we want to make sure that your questions are answered, your needs are addressed, and that's really the whole purpose of the study. Obviously, the main goal when all this is said and done is to improve safety, accessibility, and comfort for active transportation users. So we're going to have these potentially these developments on the WMATA parcels, Virginia Tech parcels, and certainly the City of Falls Church with their development. We want to make sure that folks can get there safely, comfortably, and that we have networks that encourage people to do so. So we have a number of other assets, not just the metro station, the Washington and Old Dominion Trail, which is just about a mile south of the metro station entrance, is a big one. So getting people to and from that trail. And then we have a bunch of recommendations already. So looking at the active Fairfax map, as I noted, there's been many comments already submitted through that. We have a number of recommendations that I'll go over in a moment that the advisory group has discussed. So trying to figure out what the priorities are within the study area is going to be the key task, and really the big kind of push for the advisory group to take care of. There's not all the money in the world to go around to make all these improvements. It's a big county. It's a big study area as well, and we need to make sure that we're targeting the things that are going to have the most benefit to people and getting them connected to the various assets around the community. As I mentioned, coordinating with the active Fairfax transportation plan, that's the bigger county-wide effort that's ongoing. Giving us a sense of the cost estimates. So again, that'll kind of play into the prioritization aspect of the study. There will undoubtedly be some projects that we can get to sooner rather than later and cheaply versus those more expensive efforts. And so we need to identify those and see that we can undertake them quickly and expediently so that we can improve this network without having to wait a number of years to do so. Informing the rezoning process. So I mentioned that's sort of starting up with the WMATA parcels. We need to make sure that we have this plan, this study rather, wrapped up so that I can inform that process. There are negotiations that would take place between the county and the developers of those parcels. And so we need to make sure that we have the guidance from you all, from the community, from the advisory group, in order to give them and tell them where we see improvements need to be made if they're within the nexus of their site. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is going to be probably new information for a lot of you, but this is one way we're looking at identifying sort of the gaps within the pedestrian network. And this is a metric to look at comfort for pedestrians using a number of variables that are listed below. So pathway width, how wide is the sidewalk? Obviously, wider the better. Posted speed limit, obviously the slower the better for pedestrians. If there's a buffer present between the sidewalk and the adjacent roadway, and a number of other things. So striped parking lanes, street trees, bike lane, those can kind of provide an additional buffer for pedestrians. Average daily traffic I mentioned, and whether or not there's a curb can be a factor in providing comfort for pedestrians. So this idea really came about from Montgomery County's planning department. They worked with a group called Tool Design back in 2019. They've kind of been pushing this pedestrian level of comfort metric throughout their county. They have, if you follow the link there, a map of their entire county. I think they've got pretty much every segment of their county mapped out with this metric. So it's a big undertaking. But essentially what it is it takes all these various variables that can affect comfort for pedestrians, combines them into a score, and you can see what that looks like below on the scale. So 1 being very comfortable and green, all the way down to 5 not having anywhere to walk, no pathway, no sidewalk. Our version is a little bit different than Montgomery County's, and you can see what that looks like for the study area on the right. And we're going to go through the study area in 4 quadrants. So we can go to the next slide to look at the first quadrant. And I apologize, before we do that, a couple examples might help. So we have Shreve Road here. You can see kind of an overview of the map on the right. This is Shreve Road approaching Leesburg Pike. And if you look on the image on the left, you can kind of see what that looks like if you're a pedestrian. So not a very wide sidewalk, not a lot of space between you and the adjacent traffic. Speed limit is 35. All those variables combine to give you a score of uncomfortable. And this is, really one of the main ways that you would get to this site from the W&OD trail is taking this sidewalk, crossing over through the city of Falls Church, and then getting to the metro along Hitchcock Road. And with the city's development, they'll have a parallel roadway that will also connect you. So this could really use some improvement, obviously. If we go to the next slide, this is going to be a more positive example. This is Haycock Road, the west side of Haycock Road, north of Turner Avenue. This is probably the best part of this trail. This is, and I'll talk about this a little later. One of the big focus areas of the advisory group is this Haycock Road trail. But you can see here on the image on the left, it's fairly wide, 6 feet wide, slower speed. There's a big buffer between pedestrians and the roadway. So for that reason, this is rated comfortable. So obviously it could be improved. You can make it a little wider. You could make it accommodating for cyclists, certainly, by doing that. And then, if you look at the total network here, if you look at the trail from Great Falls Street to the metro itself, obviously a fair number of improvements could be made along the entire stretch. So we'll get to those in a minute. But that's basically what this is intended to do. It's intended to show the advisory group where sort of the pinch points might be and where there could be improvements made in the greater network surrounding the metro station. We can go to the next slide. And now we should be getting to, it's lagging a little bit. There we go. Oops. There we go. There's a lot to take in here, which is why it's taking a little bit. So these slides, again, will be posted on the website. So I know folks are not going to be able to read everything right now, but this is sort of a more intense version of what we have in our survey. You can see I'll start kind of in the top left. The dark blue boxes are showing what we currently have completed projects within this segment. The light blue, kind of, I guess, medium blue, you could say, boxes are what's in the TPP or other plans. So projects that are currently within a county document that are at least sort of partially funded or considered to be funded by the transportation priorities plan. The lighter blue boxes are the recommendations that we're asking the advisory group to consider, and then through the community survey, asking the community to weigh in on. So there's a number of these. I'll point out, kind of looking again at the pedestrian level of comfort in this area, you see there's a lot of red. So a lot of areas where there's not sidewalk. And so we've had to kind of think a little more outside the box in what we want to propose. Obviously, putting sidewalk everywhere is not financially feasible, and nor is it really politically feasible. There's some folks that just don't want sidewalk in front of their house, and that's fine. a lot of times they have to give up their parking. There are other considerations to keep in mind when doing that. So we've had to think outside the box a little bit in addressing these. One of the other big recommendations that the advisory group has discussed here is number 8, which is improving the safety and comfort crossing Leesburg Pike from Shreve Road or Hitchcock Road. So that we've had a number of different ideas floating about. How can we minimize the crossing distance for pedestrians, either by putting in a median refuge, perhaps including a bulb out on one of the corners. But of course, there are impacts to vehicular traffic when you do that. And when we studied it, there was sort of a large impact to the queue length of cars that sort of stack up to wait at the light there. There's already been some cut-through issues within these area roadways. And so these are things that the advisory group is sort of having to consider, trade-offs that might need to be made when looking at these recommendations. So we can go to the next slide, and I'll talk about a couple examples here as well. You can see the pedestrian network is quite a bit better. You don't see a lot of the gaps that you did on the southwest quadrant. So a lot of the recommendations here are crossing Idlewood Road. So getting across Idlewood Road between the school and the other side, the south side of Idlewood. One of the recommendations that's been maybe a little controversial among the advisory group is number 7, and that's providing a connection through the Metro rail yard. So a lot of pros and cons in weighing that recommendation, security being one of the issues that would need to be considered. The biggest one probably would be feasibility and cost. There was a feasibility study done a number of years ago. Implementing some sort of pedestrian connection across or through that rail yard would cost somewhere in the tens of millions of dollars, and it wouldn't be necessarily the most direct connection, but still one that some of the advisory group members have honed in on and seen as a worthwhile improvement. Just some considerations to weigh there. Other improvements along Route 7 itself, looking at number 4 and number 5, sort of improving the intersection there for pedestrians, high visibility crosswalks, and rapid flashing beacons where appropriate. Go to the next slide. Now we're looking at the northeast quadrant, and you can see most of the recommendations are sort of clustered along the main roadways here. You see Great Falls Street, you see Hitchcock Road, Westmoreland. So the focus really for this segment has been to make crossing Great Falls Street, crossing Westmoreland, crossing Hitchcock safer for pedestrians. You have a school, if you can see sort of the Westmoreland Street icon there, the Hitchcock Elementary School and Longfellow Middle School is above that. So really an important consideration for the advisory group is making sure that students can get to school safely. One of the recommendations that might help with that is recommendation number 7. That's one that they've given a lot of thought to, adding a mid-block crossing at Casemont Road, which would then take you over to the trail on Hitchcock. We'd have to obviously discuss that with VDOT. There could be some visibility issues with that. We'd certainly need to include some ADA curb ramps on either side to allow people to get to the trail and to get to the other side of Hitchcock Road. But it's something that has been really important for the advisory group, along with number 4, improving that intersection of Hitchcock Road and Great Falls Street. Again, traveling west of that is where you get to the metro station. So allowing folks to do that safely is obviously very important. And you can see in this map lots of red again. So older communities developed before sidewalks were really a great priority. So a lot of missing infrastructure there. Go to the next slide. This will be the last quadrant, which is the southeast quadrant. And again, just kind of focused more towards the metro station itself along Hitchcock Road. A number of improvements. The biggest one by far is improving the pathway along the north side of Hitchcock Road from Great Falls Street to the Metro Access Road. That is really the main way for anybody on this side of 66 to get over to the metro station. So we've talked with the advisory group about a number of different options there. If you've ever walked that trail, you know that it's very narrow. There's not a lot of separation, certainly when you're crossing the bridge between you and traffic. So we've talked about widening the sidewalk as a potential along the bridge, moving the guardrail to allow the trail to be expanded closer to Turner Avenue, including a high visibility crosswalk over Turner Avenue is another recommendation. So that's really been the advisory group's focus on this quadrant in particular is, how do we improve that connection? There's a number of other recommendations here, of course, as well. And then some notable improvements that have recently been made. One is in the bottom right, the sidewalk along Great Falls Street from Northwest Street to Osborne Street. That was a really great project recently that expanded sidewalk in some areas and added it where it wasn't. So that's been a great amenity for folks that live in that area. But kind of continuing that along Great Falls Street and Haycock Road is something that this advisory group has been looking into. Next slide. I mentioned some other potential improvements, one of which is called a road diet. Essentially what this is repurposing the vehicular travel lanes for other uses. So in this case, pedestrian or bicycle uses. You can see an example of that on the right. So we've kind of thought about this for Haycock Road, potentially removing one of the through lanes in each direction from Falls Church Drive to east end of the bridge over I-66, and then through that road diet, allowing more space for pedestrian and bicycle facilities. Again, disclaimer with this one, we would need to do a detailed traffic analysis to determine, the impacts to vehicular traffic, of course, if we're going to pursue this option. But, one of the potential improvements that has been looked at with this study. Go to the next slide. This one's a little more unconventional. It has not been done in Fairfax County nor in the state of Virginia yet, to my knowledge, but it has been pursued in DC and with greater success in San Francisco and LA. And it's the slow streets concept, which is really intended to not only limit vehicular traffic to local traffic. So if you live on this street, you can certainly still access your driveway, get deliveries. Emergency vehicle access, of course, could be allowed down the street, but to try to prevent others from using your street as a cut through. And then if there is any sort of vehicular travel on the street, it's going to be slower. So speeds of 15 miles per hour or less. As I said, this was really met most successfully sort of on the West Coast. They've done some more permanent solutions, as you can see on the bottom right image. Mostly this was pursued during COVID, sort of as a temporary measure. DC did a number of temporary slow streets, but it has sort of this idea has sort of gained steam. I know the Safe Streets for All program that I mentioned that the Active Fairfax team has looked at. It includes a recommendation for sort of these slower streets. So it is something that is definitely worth considering at least. Again, VDOT would need to weigh in on this, of course, as they own the roads, but maybe implementing this as sort of a pilot project. We've looked at specifically Chestnut Street and Gordon's, sort of south of Route 7, as potential candidates for this concept. Next slide. Another idea is one-way neighborhood streets. So this sort of got a mixed reaction from the advisory group, but you could see how using one-way streets, you could repurpose some of the roadway for pedestrian and cyclist uses. So we've kind of looked at that here. Dale Drive coming off of Leesburg Pike, making that one way, and then Chestnut Street, making that one way going in the opposite direction to still allow folks to access Route 7, to and from Route 7. And then kind of looking at Pine Castle Road. These are all within the Falls Hill community. And seeing if we might be able to use these one-way street concepts to, again, not have to take away parking necessarily, but repurpose the roadway, whether it's striping out a bike lane or putting up some other sort of temporary structures to allow for pedestrians to use the roadway while not, overcrowding with vehicles going in either direction. So another concept that the advisory group has sort of considered as an alternative. Again, I've noted we are not likely to be able to put sidewalks everywhere, especially not all at once. So just another kind of idea to weigh as part of the study. Next slide. Of course, we also looked at bicycle metrics. So here we're looking at bicycle level of traffic stress, and this is from the bike map. So this is an existing map that was put together by the active transportation team several years ago to look at kind of the same thing that we already talked about in relation to pedestrians. You're really looking at whether or not these roadways are comfortable for cyclists to use. And so you can see the green outlines, mostly residential streets, slower speed. Those are going to provide the most comfort for folks riding their bike along those streets, all the way down to use caution. I've outlined those in red. If you go to the bike map online, they're in kind of gray, but that didn't really stand out on the map. So those are outlined in red here, and you can see sort of makes sense. You see Leesburg Pike, Hitchcock Road, Shreve Road, Idlewood. Those are, again, Great Falls. Those are the more heavily traveled roadways in terms of vehicular traffic, and so not as comfortable for cyclists. Go to the next slide. And so from that, you have the network recommendations where we would like to see improvements for cyclists within the larger 2-mile area. So again, FAB has been really helpful in helping us determine which of these segments are most important for cyclists. Those are all listed here. Again, this is on the survey, but again, highlighting Leesburg Pike, Great Falls Street, Haycock Road, Idlewood Road. Those are sort of the main arteries that feed into the metro station. And so it makes sense that those are sort of listed on here as needing improvement. Go to the next slide. Okay, so wrapping up here, again, I mentioned that we've had several meetings with the advisory group. So that started back in December when the project really kicked off. We've met with the technical group 3 times now, leading up to this second round of community meetings. This won't be the final round. We'll have another round of community meetings as noted later on the timeline to sort of review the results of the survey and kind of present this report to everybody. But really now we're in the thick of things. We put this community survey out there. Some postcards were sent out. We did hear that some folks did not get them, so we are actually sending another round, and we are extending the survey deadline so that we can get as much participation as possible in that survey and with the study as a whole. But that's where we're at right now. After that, we refine the recommendations list, given the comments we get from the community, and start to establish these priorities. So again, it's going to be a lot of different projects to look at. Really, the big benefit of this study will be to prioritize those projects and see where we can make improvements, expediently, and where we want to see the most bang for our buck in getting folks to the metro station. After the study is published, sometime in the fall, summer, fall of this year, again, the work continues. We need to secure funding again for the priority projects, as I mentioned, and start implementing these things. So you can see at the bottom, The public can submit comments throughout the process. Again, this is supposed to be transparent and make sure that we can get your questions answered and get you involved as much as possible. Coordination with the advisory group and the technical group is ongoing. We have a number of meetings yet to come. And then our goal, again, is to finalize the recommendations list prior to rezoning of the WMATA site, which we're expecting towards the end of this year. So should have no problem in getting that done. And then last two slides coming up, and then we'll open it up for questions. So again, this is kind of just a rehash of what I already talked about with the timeline, but kind of outlining our next steps, compiling the survey. Again, we've extended the survey. It's going to be open until June 13th. We've got a number of people that have already participated. Last we checked, it was 71 people have already taken the survey, so that's great, but obviously we want much more than that. We're going to review those results in July with the advisory group. That'll be our 5th meeting with them. And then finally, we'll try to wrap things up, hold a 3rd round of community meetings sometime in the summer, fall of this year, and publish a report with the priorities and all of your feedback. So that does it for my presentation. Again, my email address is listed here. So if you have any comments, questions after the meeting, if we didn't get to anything during the meeting tonight or Thursday, please feel free to reach out to me. And then please complete our survey. That's linked at the bottom. You can find more information. Look at the scope of work for the study, look at the maps, and look at past meeting recordings to sort of get some more information on our study website. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mike and take some questions.
All right, thank you, Tim. So I want to just go over a couple of quick things for everyone who's participating. There are 2 ways to provide your input and comments if you are participating from your computer and on Teams itself. You can type your comment into the chat feature if you like. So that is one way, and we've kind of already started it, so you can kind of hopefully see it flowing. If you don't see it, there is a at the top right of your screen, there's a people, a chat, a react. So if you click on the chat on one, it looks like kind of a question mark, or sorry, a comment box that you can kind of look into. Then you can actually go ahead and type your comment in there. The other way to do it is also to raise your hand. And so you kind of just push on that. And what we'll do is we'll enable your microphone, and then you actually have to unmute yourself. We can't unmute you. And then you'll be able to state your comment or question. We are asking that anyone who kind of does it this way, please keep your comments or questions to about a minute. Allow for everyone else to kind of participate in the meeting. You're free. We'll lower your hand. We'll put you back in the queue. And if you have more comments or questions, we'll take them. We just want to give everyone a chance to actually have their questions or comments answered. And finally, if you're participating on phone, when you called in, you probably heard the prompts, but I just want to make sure that you are aware what they are. One is we can't see your name, so we will call you out by your 10-digit phone number. So please know your phone number. But you can push *5 to raise your hand, and when we see it raised, we'll call your number, and then you push *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, we'll tell you when you can do that. When you're done, we'll ask you to push *6 to mute yourself again, and then *5 to lower your hand. And you'll still get the phone prompts as you continue to do so. So with that, we're going to go ahead and turn it over. Tim, there was a question that kind of came in before we get to the hands real quick. The first one that came in, I want to make sure that you can get to it. Let me just give me one moment here. They wanted to know, are there any representatives from the West Hampton neighborhood? And so what I thought you could do is just tell people how representation from the advisory group was formulated. And so I think that might be more helpful.
Sure. Yeah, and we can go back to that slide to the advisory group listing. But basically, within the scope of work, we noted that there should be representatives from Drainsville and Providence districts. So those are the 2 districts within the study area. The supervisor's office for each of those districts then went out and sort of did the selection, picked the folks that they thought would best represent the advisory group for those areas. So yeah, you can see that here. So we The goal is to have 3 representatives from each district, 2 from Drainsville and Providence District School PTAs, and then, of course, I outlined a couple of other associations as well.
Okay. So we didn't actually specifically ask for neighborhoods. We asked for the supervisor to provide representatives from their actual district. So that's how they were selected. The next question that kind of came in was, will parking also be considered in this study? And it had to do when you were talking about like road diets and repurposing that way.
Gotcha. So parking could be considered. It's not something that we've spent much time talking about. I did mention it as being a sort of a variable in that pedestrian level of comfort metric. Again, if it's on-street parking and if it's a striped out lane, so you have a dedicated parking lane that's sort of like almost like a permanent buffer. There are pros and cons to that, of course. If you have a bunch of parked cars when a pedestrian is trying to cross a street, that could provide a visibility issue. But otherwise, we haven't really talked about parking. Really, the main focus has been on, sort of identifying the areas where we see pedestrian and bicycle improvements are needed.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go over to our actual, we have some hands raised. Zenobia Pantaki, I am apologizing in advance if I accidentally mispronounce your name. It's not my intention, obviously. You can go ahead. Your microphone is enabled, so you can unmute yourself.
I know you haven't mispronounced my name at all, so that's perfect. I'll just very briefly state 3 questions. I live on Highland Avenue, and the traffic on Haycock, even currently, is so high that with this development, we are going to see many more vehicles. To add to that, if you're going to make a cycle lane on Haycock, I don't know what the implications of the congestion will be on Haycock, which is a feeder into the metro station at the moment and into this facility. And that having been said, my second question was, to continue with the cyclists, it's nice to have cycle lanes, but there needs to be a study, because what I've seen in Arlington when I drive to work is that for the sake of 2 cycles, you have a road which used to be a 2-lane road converted into a 1-lane road for vehicles. Whereas you find 1 cyclist on maybe a stretch of 2 miles. So there needs to be some proportion to doing a study to see how many people are actually using the cycle track. And does that make sense to reduce the lane for the vehicular traffic? And lastly, my question is that, okay, we go ahead, you implement all this stuff, but suppose the traffic is much more than what your study showed, and that has negative impact for residents like us. Will there be a reevaluation, some reform, some changes, some modifications? That's about it from me.
Okay, thank you. I'm really glad you raised that point, because as I mentioned, there would be trade-offs. So we would need to do an analysis of traffic along Haycock Road if we're going to consider a road diet, because you're right, there would be implications for vehicular traffic if you took away a lane in each direction. One thing I will mention is that the advisory group has really been focused on widening the pathways. If we're talking about Haycock Road, widening that pathway along the north side, widening the sidewalk. And so you could see that as a shared facility for pedestrians and cyclists. And really that would be preferable for most people, at least, is to have a facility off street. Haycock Road, kind of north and east of Turner Avenue and the metro station, is quite narrow. So not a lot of room for cyclists in the roadway anyways. So even if we were going to have sort of an on-street bike lane on a portion of Haycock, it would be unlikely we could continue that same facility east of the station. So really, I think that the better solution in my mind, and I think the advisory group tends to agree, is to sort of have this pedestrian and cyclist traffic accommodated off street.
But Tim, let me add real quick, please. This is Chris Wells of the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. There are other benefits to the bike lanes that are not just for the bicyclists. One of the reasons that these are popular in Arlington and in Fairfax is that they when a 4-lane road, for instance, is reduced to a 2-lane road, it tends to reduce the speeding on the road. In fact, it tends to eliminate the excessive speeding on the road. And then for pedestrians crossing the road, they're now their exposure risk, as it's called, is now reduced to 1 lane of cars coming in one direction and 1 lane of cars coming in the other direction. So even though the community might see these as bike lanes and there's not that many bicyclists, we know that a majority of our communities are very concerned about cut-through traffic and speeding and the quality of life in their neighborhood. And by modifying the road with these type of treatments, we actually can improve those things that the communities do care about, even if they're not bicyclists.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. And if you look at number 13 on the slide that's pulled up here, again, one of the other benefits would potentially be to include a refuge island on Haycock. So again, kind of reducing the crossing distance, making it easier, more accessible for pedestrians to get across Haycock Road. So that'd be another benefit of kind of doing the road diet option. Okay, I guess we can go to the next question.
So the one thing I wanted to address, and the final one is, if we implement all this development, will there be a reevaluation if something doesn't work out? So we do constantly try to keep an eye on the comprehensive plan and kind of look to see how development is occurring and try to stay in front of it as best we can. But the county is constantly trying to take a look at it. And when we go through these particular areas and there's development activity that occur, we do have them do, if they qualify for it, a traffic study or a transportation study now, because we're looking at all modes in these particular studies. So not just cars anymore, but we're looking at pedestrians and bicyclists and transit users and the car traveler as well. So that is something that's happening through the zoning cases, and it's something we're doing as we continue to monitor the plans. With that, I wanted to turn it over next. Kathy Pippin, you're next. I'm going to enable your microphone, and it's enabled so you can now unmute yourself. And Kathy Pippin, you have to unmute yourself if you, there you go.
Yes, there we go. Okay, all right, thank you so much. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, my son almost got hit on Haycock crossing onto Casemont. And I know Haycock, Casemont, that is one of the hot issues. So I'm bringing that on because I, on a daily basis, witness kids, pedestrian trying to come to either side of the Haycock through Casemont, whether it's for school or whether going to the metro, that cars are speeding and cars are not stopping. And in this case, a school bus stopped for him. And there were 3-4 cars stopped behind the bus. However, one guy apparently was impatient and he just veered out of the line and even had the audacity to blew his horn at him, and that really scared my son. So anyway, it didn't end in a tragic, but easily these kind of that section definitely could has the potential for something really unhappy to happen. So now we have driven in the neighborhood, and there are plenty of intersections just like Haycock and Casemont. And I know that in the past we've heard the word, from VDOT. VDOT is the one. VDOT has even evaluated, oh no, it's got to be 2 sidewalks on both sides of the road to be able to put a crosswalk or flashing light or something. Well, there is City of Falls Church. They have done multiple of this. One in particular, and forgive me, I forgot to write the name of the road, but it's either on Lincoln or probably Lincoln or West. That there on one side of the road there is sidewalk, on the other side there is no sidewalk, and they do have a crosswalk and the sign pedestrian sign. In McLean, at the intersection of Bon, forgive me if I mispronounce this again, Bonheim, Bonheim, Court and Westmoreland. right there, the same situation. One side of the road has a very nice lengthy sidewalk. The other side is a very short sidewalk. It kind of ends like really on the other side of Haycock, that or by Casemont. So they have a nice crosswalk, flashing lights, and a pedestrian yellow sign. So it would be great for VDOT to not to consider these things, because this has been done and we really need it at Haycock and Casemont. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is Teresa Zemmelman. I'm going to enable your microphone. Okay, you can unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. I live on Great Falls Street near the bridge to over 66 that goes into Falls Church City. And we have no sidewalk and we have no way to cross Great Falls Street so that our kids can get to Haycock Elementary. So it's a big problem. And I saw in the development plan the potential for adding a sidewalk, hopefully there, or adding a crosswalk at Moley and across Great Falls Street, which would be helpful. But my next question is, given that there are parked cars on both sides of Great Falls, would the addition of a crosswalk at that location also include a stop sign for Great Falls Street traffic? Because without a stop sign, I feel that we could just get hit in a crosswalk instead. It's very dangerous to cross Great Falls Street in the morning, and there are a lot of speeding cars. And I know that one of the solutions proposed was potentially lowering the speed limit, which I would support, but then we would also need enforcement of that. And I would also encourage the adoption of some stop signs, not only at wherever there are going to be new crosswalks installed, but potentially at all of the intersecting roads to Great Falls Street to discourage the speeding cars, because it's really pretty dangerous. So that's just something to think about. Thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay, next up is Judy CF. Okay, I'm going to enable your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, three quick areas. The first is choosing priorities. What are the rules, and how will it be enforced? Will the number of votes on the survey have a great deal of sway in terms of what gets picked? And I ask that because there's two issues here. One is not everybody is informed. I live 1,500 feet from the station. I didn't get a postcard. I have followed these meetings for years, and so I stay tuned in, but I've asked all my neighbors. Nobody knows about it. Simply listing them on Supervisor Faust's newsletter doesn't help, because most people don't spend their time looking at that, frankly. Those of us who are really tuned in and who've lived here for a long time know more about the community, perhaps. So how are the rules going to be made? Will they be made based upon who votes for what? And if so, who are the voters? And the other issue is, will the decisions be made on what I would call qualitative versus quantitative? Just listening to the last two speakers, might it not be more important to choose those intersections that involve hundreds of children trying to walk to school and put those ahead of the other intersections that are inconvenient for us adults, but passable? So you've got a big job in terms of choosing the priorities here. Obviously, not everybody's going to be happy. The second issue is, how is this exercise different from the recent McLean Citizens Association submitting a list of priorities, many of which are your listed improvements as well, that Supervisor Faust then brought to the county. Apparently there's $100 million that in improvements. Maybe we can get some of them done that way, and you can spread your requests for money to other areas. So being aware of all the ways we can ask for money is important. And the third has to do with funding. When I listened to the developers at the Metro Task Force meetings, they were very quick to point out problems in infrastructure in the surrounding neighborhood, and sounded very much like they were going to be helping to ameliorate some of these difficulties. Now I read that they say they're not going to give any money except for the infrastructure within their development area. Well, that leaves us totally at the mercy of the county. And I would like to kind of put in a bid for the fact that a lot of other communities want improvements too, but this is going to bring a lot of money to the county. Maybe we deserve some consideration because we will be more inconvenienced than some other places that want sidewalks. So you've got a big job on your hands. I recognize it, but these are some of the things I wanted to kind of point out.
Okay. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to farm these around the dais so that we can get them answered. Tim, we're going to take them in order. So choosing priorities. Can you kind of briefly say how we expect to kind of handle this?
Sure. Yeah, and I apologize that some folks didn't seem to get the postcard. We are going to be mailing out a second round of postcards, hopefully by early next week, and checking that list and making sure that it's going to everybody within the 1 mile radius. And we are extending the survey as well. We want to get people's feedback, and I realize that we need to do a little bit more outreach in order to do that. So with the priorities, that's really going to come up to the advisory group. They're going to be really taking the task to come up with the priorities. Now, the survey, of course, is going to be really important in informing their decisions. They've already, many of them gone out and talked with their neighbors and talked with members of the community. The survey results will be published in the report, so you'll be able to see what the community as a whole has, identified as priorities, what improvements they want to see. The advisory group may differ on those when they weigh the other things you've talked about, connectivity to the schools in the area, and they hopefully, as advisory group members and from attending these meetings, are, a bit more informed than the average person taking the survey, given the level of detail that they've kind of delved into with this study. So again, the survey is going to be really important because it will help them make those decisions, but it's not going to be the determining factor necessarily on what those decisions are. Everything is going to be laid out there. Again, we're going to, publish everything in the report when it comes out, and we're going to have another one of these round of community meetings. But really, the advisory group is going to be burdened with that task, so to speak, of prioritizing these improvements, since they're sort of the representatives of their community.
And I'll also point out that those priorities, as they're kind of coming up through the community from the survey to the advisory group, will be sent to the supervisors, who ultimately will be able to kind of make the ultimate decision for that. So depending on funding and what's available, the supervisors can move things around as needed. And so so with that, I wanted to move on to the next question, which was, how is this exercise different from what the McLean Citizen Association did in the $100 million that's available right now? Tom, did you want to answer that one?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Tom Bashadny, I'm the director of Fairfax County's Department of Transportation. So this effort isn't necessarily independent of the effort that the Board of Supervisors has asked that we engage in. And what the board did was they indicated that they would like to set aside $100 million for bike and pedestrian safety improvements over a 6-year period. They've established the first 5 million of that. And so I would envision that some of the recommendations that come out of this study will in fact be considered for funding as part of that $100 million effort. And so the McLean Citizen Association has provided a list of their recommendations. I'm sure that there will be others that provide recommendations, and then ultimately there'll be recommendations from this study as well that will be considered for implementation using portions of that $100 million. So they're not independent. That is one of the funding sources that we'll consider in terms of trying to implement these recommendations, but it won't be the only funding source that we consider.
Thank you, Tom. And that kind of briefly got onto the third question, which talked about funding. Our director, Tom Bashadny, did a presentation at the last advisory group meeting, which was recorded and posted to the project website, that we can actually pinpoint for you all. And he actually talked about the funding options that are potentially available to help implement some of these improvements, both from the regional, local, and state and federal levels. So it's a very informative presentation if you want to see what kind of funding options are available. But one thing that was talked about specifically was with relating to this development and saying that they're only going to fund infrastructure within kind of their site. I'd say they have to file their zoning case first, and then when that comes into the county, then the county can look at it and determine what is kind of the appropriate infrastructure for them to kind of put in. And if they need to go outside their site, then they will go outside their site. But again, that's gone through a negotiation with the county to make sure that the improvements are appropriate for what's going on in the area. So I wouldn't say that's the end all be all, even though if that's what they've said. I think it's to be determined at this time. Okay, and the next question is from Paul Rothstein. I'm going to enable your microphone. Okay, you can unmute yourself. Paul Rothstein, you can unmute yourself. Okay, I'm going to just hold it there, Paul. I'll come back to you. I'm going to remute you. I'm going to disable your microphone and come back to you in a moment. Okay, next up is a phone call. So 703-536-1011. Okay, I've enabled your microphone. You should hear the prompt to go ahead and unmute yourself. *6. Okay, you've lowered your hand. So I'm going to consider that that's not a question. Okay, I'm going to move on.
Can you hear me?
I can. Do you have a question?
Great. I have two significant problems with your plans. I live on Birch Street, parallel to Hitchcock Road by 1 block east. I did not receive a survey in any format that I can open on my computer. First significant problem I have is looking at the planning maps, there's a significant lack of parking. Yet I see where the developers are requesting a waiver of the requirements for parking. Do not allow a waiver. This is just going to drive more people into our nearby neighborhood to park in my driveway and on my street. Two, there are thousands of trips of vehicles per day already. 7 or 8 years ago, Fairfax County did a traffic survey on Birch Street with the pressure hoses. They counted 1,800 plus cars a day, and that was several years back, right on Birch Street. Cut-through traffic on Highland, Birch, and Grove is going to increase significantly by the planning that you've got. People cutting through from Haycock via Grove, Birch, Route 7, and back. It's especially bad in the evening when traffic on Route 7 wants to go to Haycock. They can avoid 2 or 3 traffic lights by a right turn on red from Route 7 onto Birch, then left on Grove and right on Haycock, skipping those traffic lights. I don't know how many cars we're going to have down our street. I already have obtained a speed bump on Birch Street, 3-way stop at corner of Grove and Birch, street lights, and a sidewalk so the kids can ride their bicycles. Supervisor Faust's office knows me by the sound of my voice. And you've got 2 big problems on parking and traffic. Are you there? Hello?
Oh, yeah, we hear you.
Sorry, appreciate I was on mute. Yes, we heard you. Do you have anything else to add?
I think that's enough. I could come up with some other things, but in my allotted time, that's all I think I should bring up.
Okay, well, thank you so much. All right, I'm gonna disable your microphone and thank you. All right, Tim, did you want to talk about anything related to some of the comments in terms of considerations that could be done for the potential forecasting trips, and then how that kind of plays into kind of what we're trying to do with this particular study?
Sure. So we really just sort of forecasted trips again well into the future for the main area roadways. You can see on this map, Birch Street highlighted. Gentleman just noted one of the improvements that was completed there, including a sidewalk from Grove Avenue to the City of Falls Church. So if there is a concern with vehicular traffic cut through, for example, that would be handled outside of this study. In most cases, people would use the Residential Traffic Administration Program to address cut through issues or traffic calming issues. That being said, if there are ideas for Birch Street, making it more pedestrian friendly, bicycle friendly, we'd like to hear those. So if there's something going beyond just including sidewalk, we'd like to hear that and consider that, and let the advisory group discuss that recommendation as well.
Okay, thank you. And then as far as the zoning case, they are supposed to reach out to the community if they haven't already. I believe they have. And as far as parking on site, you can relay those comments to them. And when the zoning case actually gets accepted within the county, then you can obviously let the staff know as well. So that's kind of the two ways to do it. So moving on, Paul Rothstein, I'll try you again. Your microphone is enabled. You can unmute yourself. Okay. Paul Rothstein, you have to unmute yourself if you're there. All right, I will come back to Paul. Okay. Next up, ATK, you're next. That's all I have. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello, I'm Andy Clemmis, and I'm located at the corner of Red and Redfield. So I have seeing at least two impacts to our street, one at the potential Metro Depot walking crosswalk getting to the station that way, and then on the other side of Red, you have a bridge showing on the map, which, none of these things have been really presented to the people impacted on my street. And I just want to echo what everyone else is saying. Nobody in the neighborhood is really out in front able to respond to these things. And so I would recommend, if there are anywhere that you anticipate, the opposite of improved safety, the opposite of improved accessibility, and the opposite of improved comfort, those people need aggressive outreach. It's more than just a couple community meetings and a couple disclosures. It needs to be aggressive outreach. The studies need to justify why the additional traffic is coming in those places, and the accountability for why the easements are not being used. The run down Stream Valley Park on all the county planning maps shows Pimmet Run as something that's going to move pedestrians and bikers. Well, where is that plan? You need a paragraph in your study dedicated to showing accountability for how you have complementary invested with the other plan, because that plan is on the 2018 map. And, our neighborhood has no idea exactly how that is implemented or how it's funded. And you're jumping ahead with putting in more sidewalk and putting in dubious traffic improvements. And this is the second big recommendation. The bikers below the age of 15, which was, I'm amplifying on at least 3 previous speakers here. You know, people move here in Fairfax County for the school systems. They move to these neighborhoods around the metro area, partly for commuting, but very much for the school, the elementary, the middle, and the high school. So those are the targets for morning transportation. And if you are going to do a strategic study, then your maps will not show yellow or green if the students cannot get to those schools. And I'm seeing a lot of yellow. You know, we are a grid right now. We're a grid that's bounded by Leesburg Pike, by the 267 Access Road, and Great Falls and Westmoreland. And people below the age of 16, you know, do not, they have zero bike access. And so what are you doing with the existing easements? That needs to be thought out of the box. The representatives on these committees, they don't have a vision for how it can work. The way it works in San Diego, those are the people who should be on your advisory committee, the people who can use the easements and eliminate the morning trips for the kids and maybe focus just on the adults with the cars and the gasoline. And for the kids, you know, we need to get them on the bikes. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to continue to move forward. Let's see here. One thing I'm going to do is mention something out of the chat real quick. It's one of the advisory group members requested that to mention that WMATA will have WMATA will have public hearing regarding the plan changes from the development and impacts on the station. So that's kind of what we mentioned before. So there will be additional meetings on that. I'm going to move to the next person with their hand up, Rima. So Oueid. I think I'd mess up your name, so I'm going to try to do it that way. I've enabled your microphone. If you unmute yourself using the mic button at the kind of the top right of your screen, you can do that. Rima Oueid. Okay, I'm going to just move forward a little bit and we'll come back to you if you're still there. Okay, next up is Adrian White. Okay. You can unmute yourself now. Again, using the mic button at the top right. If you click that, that should unmute yourself. Adrian White. Adrian, are you there?
Okay, sorry, that took me a minute.
That's okay.
I was hitting the wrong button. I'm concerned about the methodology you picked up from MoCo because the speed limit is used as one of the criteria to rate the comfort level of various streets. For example, Haycock. Our speed limits are not enforced by the police department ever. And as a result, the 25-mile-an-hour sections of Hitchcock Road are aspirational at best. No one goes 25 miles an hour on those streets. When I drive 25 miles an hour on them, which I do often, I'm left in the dust by the cars in front of me. And so one of the things I think we have to look at, despite the fact that vehicle speeding is not exactly active, not directly related, I'll put it that way, to active transportation, is certainly indirectly related. And another example, there's speeding on Great Falls Street. As the president of the Ellison Heights Mount Daniel Association, I have a history of asking the McLean Police Department to do radar, to do speed enforcement on Great Falls Street. The one time they say they did not tell me where they set up, how long they were out there, but they did report back to me that there was no speeding, which is laughable. I see and have followed cars going easily 45 to 50 miles an hour. Now the speed limit's 35. I believe one of our suggestions was to lower it, and I've talked to Supervisor Faust about using that 2021 law by the General Assembly, over which there is some contention, to go ahead and have the county lower the speed limit because VDOT has refused. If we can lower the speed limits and enforce them, the latter being critical, I think we can make our streets and certainly crossing the streets more comfortable for pedestrians, and we can certainly help bicyclists as well. As you know, on Great Falls Street, the new sidewalk is not being used by bicyclists. They are using the street lanes, and I have seen tractor trailers pass them with inches to spare. That's because the city of Falls Church is not enforcing their no trucks rule on their section of Great Falls Street. So it's complicated, but without enforcement, I think that speed limits are fictional. And one thing jumped out at me, and that was on the slide you showed, Tim, that 25 miles an hour, which might contribute to making the level of comfort acceptable, is fictional. And I've got a lot more to say. I'm not gonna monopolize the time. Tim, I'll get in touch with you after the session.
Okay, that's a good point. Something I should have mentioned is, looking at this methodology, it's not perfect. There's certainly, when you go out and walk there today, you're going to be able to sort of determine how comfortable a sidewalk or a trail is. This is an effort to kind of rate on a similar scale all these different facilities in a very large study area. But really, personal experience weighs in a lot more. When we hear from folks about speeding problems, obviously you're right, enforcement is a big issue, and as somebody else noted, even if we were to lower the speeds, it's not necessarily true that people are going to be adhering to those posted speed limits. So one way to sort of alleviate those issues, aside from enforcement, of course, is to, again, try to build these to a level that is more comfortable. So looking at the other variables that I mentioned, widening the sidewalk, widening the buffer, providing a greater space between the pedestrian and the moving traffic. And then for crossings, again, the speed of the roadway is a big factor in that. The number of lanes, as we mentioned, is a big factor in that. So trying to make those crossings as safe as possible, high visibility striping, rapid flashing beacons has been a solution that we've talked about. And so I think that's really going to be the key here. I mean, unfortunately, driver behavior is going to be the thing that's really hard to change, even with enforcement. If we were to station somebody at any one of these intersections, it's still not going to completely solve that problem. So I think looking at some of these other solutions, looking at ways that we can improve comfort through some of these other measures is something that we should try to pursue, along with the speed study. That's something that the advisory group has considered as well as part of the survey. Do we need speed studies done on Great Falls Street, Hitchcock Road, Shreve Road? I think it's worth considering.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. There's a question. I'm going to take it out of the chat real quick. It says, I live at the condos by the Metro and Virginia Tech off of Haycock. I've lived here for 26 years and have seen an increase in traffic. My concern is that when tech expands, there will be a tremendous increase in traffic here. She says, your thoughts. So I think she's asking probably about the whole site. And what I would do is just, if you can kind of reference these, either you or Bob reference the study that was done for the plan amendment, that might be the most helpful piece of information.
Sure. So yeah, with the plan amendment that I mentioned is sort of the background piece of the study, how really the study got going with the follow-on motion. There was a traffic impact analysis, which basically looks at existing traffic, so what it looks like today, and then they use 2019 pre-pandemic numbers, looking at the traffic volumes at a number of key intersections around the WMATA and Virginia Tech site. And then looking into the future to see what traffic would look like given this level of development being proposed. And so you're right. You know, if we're going to include a new, you know, mixed use development both at the WMATA site, at Virginia Tech, and certainly what the City of Falls Church is doing with their commercial, office, retail buildings, residential buildings, you are going to see more trips. And so that's an important consideration as part of this study is, you know, given that increase in traffic, more cars using some of these major roadways like Leesburg Pike, Hitchcock Road, how do we get folks walking and biking safely to this area? You know, traffic, as I said, is going to increase, but that doesn't mean it's going to make it you know, more difficult for pedestrians and cyclists if we can implement some of these improvements. You know, one thing that the City of Falls Church is doing and their planning effort is improving some of the intersections surrounding their site, putting in a hawk signal, which is again sort of like a, you know, a signal dedicated to pedestrians to allow them to safely cross Haycock Road. Making improvements to the Leesburg Pike, Haycock Road, and Shreve Road intersection. And then, you know, with this, you can kind of see in the map that Bob's pulled up here, this parallel roadway would then connect across Leesburg Pike with a new signal leading down kind of south below Leesburg Pike to Chestnut Street. So again, allowing another opportunity for pedestrians, cyclists to safely cross. So that's kind of all outside the site. Within the site itself, of course, pedestrians, cyclists are going to be accommodated with wider sidewalks, bicycle lanes, pedestrian scale lighting. All these were sort of included in the plan text when we were talking about the plan amendment as improvements that really need to happen if a developer is going to do anything on these two sites. So yeah, the traffic, again, is something I know that is a concern for a lot of people. I think what we need to do as part of this study is take that into consideration, of course, and see, given that increase in traffic, how can we make this, again, it's a metro station, how can we make it accessible not only for vehicles, we certainly don't want traffic levels to get out of control, and that's why we did the traffic impact analysis that really looked at, you know, how the sites are going to be affecting vehicular delay at the intersections. But of course, with this study, we're also weighing other modes of travel, pedestrians, bicyclists, and how they're going to sort of interact with this site, as well as transit. You know, transit is a big key consideration here. There's a bus rapid transit system being proposed for Leesburg Pike for Route 7. And so that's another kind of way for some of the vehicular traffic, those people that are, you know, driving, might be a single occupant vehicle. We might be able to get some more of those folks off the road and make this more of a multimodal area. So it's a consideration. It's going to continue to be one. With the rezoning that was mentioned, they are also doing a traffic impact analysis. So we'll, again, continue to look at that and continue to weigh the pros and cons and continue to weigh the different modes to make sure that we have something that sort of works well for everybody.
All right, thank you, Tim. So what I'm going to try to do is enable the last 3 microphones. So Paul, I understand you're having some difficulties with your microphone. If you look at the top right of your screen, there's a mic button. If you can click that, that should allow you to unmute yourself. I've enabled your microphone. So if you can try that approach. Again, if it's not working, you can always type your comment into the chat and put it there. But if I'm going to leave it for just a moment to see if you can unmute yourself. Again, it looks like a microphone button top right of your screen. It's next to the camera button that you cannot actually click on. Okay. Just going to give it a few more moments, see if you can do it. All right, I'm going to disable the microphone, Paul. And then if you want to try to type your comment to the chat or email us with your comment, we'll be happy to take it that way. Okay, Rima, you're next still. I'm going to try to enable your microphone. Again, the same thing. If you can look at the top right of your screen, there's an MIC microphone. If you can try to click on that and unmute yourself, that should enable your microphone. And then while we're trying that, phone number 718-263-1651. I'm going to enable your microphone here in just a moment after Rima and see if you can get ready on your end as well. You'll need to push *6 to unmute yourself. Rima, one last chance if you can try to unmute yourself. Okay. Again, if you have a question and the unmute disappeared, it should be there. If you look for your microphone is still enabled. Bob, do you want to see if you can tackle that one on the side? Remember, while you're looking for it, I'm gonna enable the microphone for phone number 718-263-1651. You can unmute yourself now, pushing *6.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, this is Paul Rothstein. After this meeting, I'm going to send you a screenshot, Tim and Mike, because someone else took their picture of their screen and they were able to submit chat. And I'm going to send you a screenshot about why I was showing that I could not submit chat. So I'd like an answer for that. Also, I was unable to unmute, and I've unmuted myself many times. But I'm going to put that away to the side for now. I'm just going to note that I see Supervisor Faust, Chief of Staff Jane Edmondson is on, and I would appreciate a direct answer from her and not from the bureaucrats on the call, because Supervisor Faust was elected to represent his constituents. At tinyurl.com/West Falls Church Danger, you'll find numerous statements regarding the lack of safety in the vicinity of the West Falls Church Metro, including Beacon Lane, where children are facing a large level of danger twice a day at the beginning and end of the school day at Hitchcock Elementary School. And you can see some very compelling pictures there that illustrate the danger. Since the 2 proposed projects at Hitchcock Road are going to generate millions of tax dollars for the county, I would like an exact word, yes or no, as an answer from Jane to this question. Does Supervisor Faust support a fully funded plan to upgrade the unsafe urban infrastructure of the area near the West Falls Church Metro to a safe urban infrastructure before approving this new traffic-inducing construction? I'd actually ask Jane to show some respect to the supervisor's constituents and simply answer yes or no before providing a further explanation. So I'd appreciate that answer from Jane Edmondson.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Jane.
Paul, I understand what you're trying to do. I don't feel.
Can
at
I get a
this
yes or
point-
no?
No, I cannot give you a yes or no.
Okay, thank you. All right. There was one question that Rima had in the chat. I'm going to see if I can find it because I understand she's having a little bit of issues with her microphone, and I'm concerned with the new development is that the new development is not going to provide adequate parking and will spill over into our neighborhood. How is this going to be remedied? I guess what I can tell you is that they're going to look at the parking with the zoning case. It was looked at with the plan amendment, and I'll turn it over to Tim or Bob in a moment to talk about that particular review. But if that is a concern, definitely let them know when they come in to meet with you. I think we've heard loud and clear that it's a concern from you all, so we'll make sure that comment gets relayed to the zoning staff so that it is evaluated, and all the information that goes with that evaluation is shared with the community. Tom, I saw you come on. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The other thing is we do have something called a residential permit parking district. And in cases where traffic from metro stations or development or schools are spilling over into the neighborhoods, we do have a tool that we can use to restrict the parking in those neighborhoods just to the residents who live in those neighborhoods. And so that is something that we can monitor. And if there is parking that occurs in the neighborhoods, we can look at implementing a residential permit parking district for those neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. I'll just add that WMATA did have a consultant do a parking demand study during the plan amendment process. So they looked at their garage, looked at current levels of parking, and then sort of projected, given the increased development, how that might, if it would be adequate in the future to accommodate future parkers. They did not see a need to include additional parking beyond that. However, we've heard from a number of you already that parking is a big consideration. We're discussing with them currently how their kiss and ride is going to work and their park and ride. So that is still ongoing, as Mike mentioned, as part of the rezoning process. We'll continue to be discussing that with them.
Okay, thanks, Tim. One more thing came in. It says, I think you or Tim, this is directed at me, mentioned community outreach by the developer for the West Falls Church Metro development. Is there a published plan or record of this? Who should associations, neighborhoods contact to request such outreach? So I know that there's a kind of a, they have to do a notification of the adjacent neighborhoods, but the manner in which they do that outreach, I'm not as familiar. Jeff, I don't know if you have anything in particular that you particularly know how the Z determines the outreach for the developer.
Mike, this is Ben. If you don't mind, maybe I can.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Ben.
If the resident would like, they could contact our office, and we'd certainly facilitate them getting in touch with the builder or the developer.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate that. Okay. And 703-536-1011. Hi again. I'm going to enable your microphone. Go ahead. Your microphone's enabled. Unless that was an errant hand. But *6 to unmute yourself. Okay. All right. I think that's your mic. Yep. Hello.
Okay. This is a terrible way to do it. I'd much rather do it on Zoom or whatever. There's just listening. Is there any way we can get a copy of the slides and everything that went on tonight that I can't see because I'm on a bloody telephone?
Yes, we will post all the information to the project website. I put the project website as obviously a link in here, but what I can see is that you obviously can't see what we're putting in here. Do you have a pen or paper handy?
I do.
I'm going to ask you to email Tim, and Tim's going to tell you his email right now, and then he'll send you directly the links for everything. We're also doing this meeting again on Thursday, so you either can listen then again, or you can wait for the link to this particular recording to be posted. So Tim, can you go ahead and say your email?
Yep, it's Timothy, Timothy, dot Kutz, Kutzjr, at fairfaxcounty.gov. And let me know if you need me to repeat that.
Yes, if you would, please.
Sure. Timothy dot Kutzjr at fairfaxcounty.gov.
Okay, let me repeat that. Timothy.kutzjr at fairfaxcounty.gov.
You got it. Yep.
Okay, and you'll give me the link for this stuff.
Yes, and as Mike said, we will be posting the recordings online, hopefully within the next few days, and we'll have the slides up as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, I see no other new questions or hands. Oh, there's one that came in real quick. It's from
Okay, I
Remo.
saw it. Yeah, a
Okay.
crosswalk is being considered at Hutchison and Great Falls Street. That is one of the recommendations on the map. With that, we would also be looking to include some sort of increased visibility through rapid flashing beacons. Yep, I see your comment there. And there's not a sidewalk on Hutchison. So you can see on the map here, that's recommendation number 3. So we need to include some sort of sidewalk, curb ramps as well, so that folks have a place to actually to land if they're crossing Great Falls Street. But yep, that's a recommendation being considered. That's going to be on or is on the survey. So if you want to take the survey and note that as one of your priorities, that would be helpful. If you have any comments on it, happy to hear those as well.
Okay, with that, a few questions coming in. So I think it's because I can't get her to unmute, but that's okay. So we're going to take them this way. Did you get the next one?
Okay, I think speed humps. Again, so speed humps would be something that would need to be considered through the Residential Traffic Administration Program, RTAP. They look at kind of administering whether or not, or deciding whether or not a speed hump is appropriate on a roadway. That has to go through a process to determine whether it's appropriate. They have a community task force that they put together. So if you want more information on that, we can include a link for the RTAP program and reach out to them to see if you can get a study on your street.
Remo, your microphone is enabled so I can hear you.
Okay, now you can.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes.
Yep.
Now, can you hear me now without the echo?
Yes, I'll mute to help out.
Okay, great. I tried multiple ways to log in. So all right, we'll look into our tech then to look into speed bumps, because we do think this neighborhood has an in and an out, so it becomes a very natural cut through. It already is, so it's only going to get worse. But then also, I was wondering in your, because we're not traffic experts in terms of knowing what's better, a stop sign versus a crosswalk with flashing lights, because I know stop signs can often get missed and passed, especially if the visibility is poor, which is the case near Hutchinson and Great Falls. So with that in mind, is it what gets the attention of drivers more? A stop sign with no lights or a crosswalk with the flashing light, if those are our two options?
Tim, why don't we defer to Chris on this one to give us, Chris, are you there?
Yes, thank you. And that's a great question. And unfortunately, there's probably not a clear-cut answer. I mean, first of all, stop signs are only approved by VDOT in what's called a warrant process, that they have to be warranted by traffic volumes. And so I'm not sure if Hutchinson and Great Falls would qualify for a stop sign. I think that the same question was asked earlier for Moley. The flashing lights, which are the rectangular rapid flash beacons, those are an excellent new tool that we have had available to us the past few years to highlight pedestrian activity in a crosswalk, so that drivers know that when they're activated, there is actually a pedestrian there. But as has been stated by numerous of folks attending tonight, unfortunately, some of our drivers are so outside of the norm that neither a stop sign nor flashing lights apparently gets them to pay attention. So there is no clear-cut answer. You know, we would look at all the options we have available to us at any of these locations, and it does unfortunately still depend on the local characteristics of the roadway, the sight distance, of visibility. You know, we have found that the rectangular rapid flash beacons are effective because people now understand, why is that car stopping? Because in the example that was given earlier of a car that's passing a line of stopped vehicles, crazy as that is, the flashing lights in numerous locations across the county are helping people understand, why is that car stopping? There's pedestrians present. So unfortunately, though, I'm not giving you a definitive answer one way or the other. We'd have to really look at that location or others to give the best specific recommendation with VDOT as our partner.
No, I appreciate the honesty, because you know, we want to, at least we're in the mix, so somebody with the knowledge will be looking into this. The last question that I had is, you know, so given that we're exploring the crosswalk at Great Falls and Hutchinson, you know, the children, when they walk to school, they walk along Hutchinson. Most kids come off of Reynolds Street up Hutchinson. That, as you can see, has no sidewalks, and there is a hill there. So when you turn left onto Hutchinson off of Great Falls to enter the neighborhood, as many folks will do when they're trying to cut through, they can't see the pedestrians coming up the hill because so there's a hill there, so you can't see the children coming up, and there is no sidewalk. So I wonder if, you know, just knowing that there's going to be an increase of volume of traffic, you know, the visibility is poor because and children will be walking to school, and that's not going to change. If in addition to the crosswalk and you know, flashing lights, that there also be consideration for a sidewalk along along Hutchinson Street between Reynolds and Great Falls. I would assume, you know, you guys would figure out what side of the street is safer, but cars come flying through there and they can't see. And that's the other reason why I was asking for the speed bumps, because it will be needed in the neighborhood. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Those are great observations.
Thank you.
Tim, we have a few more in the chat here. So one wanted to know what the potential agenda, or I guess just kind of topics, are going to be for the next public meeting, and whenever we have it next.
Sure. So the next public meeting is really going to be reviewing the results of the survey, and then the work the advisory group will be doing after kind of reviewing those results to kind of set the priorities. So really that meeting will be to share with you all what the advisory group has kind of deliberated on, where they see the biggest priority improvements, you know, among this, you know, rather large list. and indicating sort of where the study is heading in order to kind of complete it. So we'll review those results with you all, and then take any other feedback that we might need to kind of consider as we near the end of the study, and kind of publish a report after that.
Okay, and the next one is what meeting will VDOT be presented by the recommendations? I think if you can let people know how VDOT is being engaged with this particular study.
Sure. So we've had a couple of VDOT folks engaged on the technical group, for example. So we've met again with the technical group 3 times so far, and in between meetings, of course, we've talked with VDOT a number of times and sort of talking through the recommendations, pitfalls, areas of opportunity. So VDOT's engaged through this whole process. We're going to put forward these recommendations. I kind of noted some of the potential improvements on earlier slides about slow streets and one-way streets. Obviously, VDOT is going to have an opinion on those, and they have not, in many cases, been done throughout the county or even in the state of Virginia. So VDOT is obviously a big player in this, but I still think we still think it's pertinent to sort of at least put these ideas forward, have the community weigh in on them, and we can obviously discuss those with VDOT as well. But there's always opportunities to try new things, and I think we just need to make sure that we're involving them every step of the way, and we're going to continue to do that.
Okay. And then one final thing to note is that people interested in speed humps can contact Supervisor Faust's office directly. That is from his chief of staff. So with that, we are a little bit past our allotted time here. I wanted to thank you all for participating in the meeting tonight. Again, this meeting will be posted, is being recorded and will be put on the project website. The website has been put into the chat. Again, we'll make sure to get all this up there, as well as the presentation for this particular meeting will be posted there as well. And please please keep an eye out for the survey. There will be a link in the chat as well. As Tim mentioned earlier, we understand that there was a little bit of a mailing snafu. We are resending all of the mailers again with a link to the survey that will have a QR code, as well as the link to the website that has all the materials on it. We want everyone to be able to kind of access information and be able to give us their responses and feedback by June 13th. So with that, thank you very much and have a great evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you.